Welcome to In Focus. I'm your host, Yesenia Taveras. The hip-hop artist we're about to meet, Richard Raw, has been educating and uplifting our community through his music, his activism, and his nonprofit organization. He joins us now, and he's going to share with us everything that includes his journey. Welcome to the show.
How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you. This is an honor. I don't know if this is your first time being here at WITN.
With you, absolutely.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
You're doing so many wonderful things in our community, and I was just like, we have to have Richard Raw on the show to not only highlight who you are as a person, but all the great things that you're doing with our youth here in the city.
Absolutely.
So yes, we're going to get all into that. But first, tell us a little bit about who you are as a person in regards to just everything in its entirety, an activist, a father.
Yeah,
Share that with us.
Traditionally I'm a hip hop artist. I mean, that's where people know me as a hip hop artist. And from hip hop, I just got into activism as well as education. I'm big on education in terms of our young people and just trying to give them a platform to be successful. So my start is hip hop, but from hip hop, I'm just evolving.
Okay. And Richard, for those who may not know, you do get a lot of love and support from Wilmingtonians.
Absolutely.
But you're also a Wilmingtonian yourself.
Yes, born and raised here.
Wow. And what side?
North side.
North
the
side,
north side.
okay.
Right off of 25th, right off of Market Street.
And so tell us, how was it for you growing up as a young man in Wilmington?
It was beautiful. I mean, I wouldn't change a thing about my childhood. I loved it. I learned a lot. I spent a lot of time in the community, learning about the community, being a part of it. And it's been amazing. My mother was an activist, and so she planted the seed early on.
Okay. And what kind of activist? Like, what was her calling?
She worked, with children. So she did the same thing that I'm doing. I'm following in her footsteps.
Oh, she planted that seed at a very young age for you.
Yeah, she worked at the Methodist Action Program, and that was to help the youth on the east side.
Okay.
And so she ran programs, Bible school programs, and after-school programs. And she was director of programming. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, as a young child, I'm pretty sure you listened to all types of genres, all types of music. When did music find you, or when did you find music?
Probably in the late 80s. I think I've always been a musician. I used to beat on pots when I was young. And so in the late 80s, when hip-hop was at its height, it was a boom. I fell in love with the culture. I had people around me that embraced hip hop, and so I embraced it as a young child just because I liked the rhythms and the rhymes. And so in the 90s, I just honed my skills and paid attention to what was going on, and then I found my voice. And I found my voice through hip hop. And
were you ever one of those kids in school that would write lyrics in
Absolutely.
a composition book while in class?
Always. My first performance was, in elementary school. One of the principal came to me, and the whole school knew that I had a knack for words. And so she said, I want you to create something around coming back to school and calming your behavior. Because we were all coming back to school and we were wild and rowdy. And so that was the first time I took the stage, and I created music around that.
And for the young child that's watching that might be intimidated by the English language and making sure they have their pronunciation right and just everything grammatically right, how would you encourage them in regards to just writing and putting their voice on a piece of paper?
I would just say, I always tell our youth, throw paint on the wall.
Okay.
That's the first thing. Just throw paint on the wall. Just create nothingness, what seems like nothingness, and then eventually you'll find your voice. You have to do it over and over. You have to practice.
So in the process of you writing and finding your voice, who would you say were some of your influencers growing up?
Rakim, who's coming actually. Rakim will be here in November at the Queen. And so he was the inspiration because his poetic, he was poetic as an MC, as a rapper. He was poetic. So I gravitated toward him. Of course, Bob Marley, Fela Kuti, and these weren't, the artists that I truly enjoy aren't just music artists, but they're activists. They were active in their community, organizing the people around social issues. And so these are the artists that I truly love that have content, which means they look at the social issues of society and they say, how can we change them, and create music and movements around changing things for the better.
And you actually attack a lot of social issues within your music.
Absolutely.
It's a huge spectrum, actually.
Yes.
Yesterday, I was just catching up on some of your videos, and I said to myself, my goodness, you have so many messages and subliminal messages throughout your music.
Yes.
And everything from not only the words that you speak, but the attire that you wear, the place that you choose to do your video in. Talk to us about that process.
Well, I think, our people, we've been stripped of our cultural heritage, I'm a Pan-African, so I believe in the concept that Afrocentric education is going to move us to where we need to be as a people. And I realize that our people aren't gravitating toward the culture or being introduced toward authentic black culture. You know, what we think is authentic black culture is ratchet. And this isn't true. You know, our people built pyramids. Our people were the first to create language, and we have to educate our children. And if we want to produce that next generation that's going to create something new. So I think it's important for us to showcase that cultural element because there's a lack of it.
Okay, and you're very educational in the lyrics that
Yes.
you choose, your spoken word, and your genre. I mean, you go from hip hop to spoken word to jazz,
Funk, yeah,
funk.
yes.
So I'm pretty sure there's so many differences for any musician to kind of throw themselves in these different genres and to evolve from each one of them. How do you tackle that?
I mean, it's a product of growing up. See, I was introduced to so much, and that's why, for me, it's introducing our young people to different things, to different cultures, different concepts. Because, you know, some of us are pigeonholed. Some of us are just in one frame of thinking. I was introduced to jazz music, and I grew up idolizing the great jazz artists like, you know, the great Clifford Brown. I grew up listening to Clifford Brown's music. And so I said, wow, I wanted to incorporate those things that were in my spirit. These things found their way in my spirit. And so I'm trying to express the things that are in my spirit. And so funk, you know, R&B, spoken word. I mean, you know, I just was introduced to so much, and that kind of shaped who I am today.
And when you say introduce, did you introduce yourself or someone
No,
else?
I had people around me. You know, I was inquisitive as a child, and people would come to me and say, you ever heard of John Coltrane? Or they would listen to something, and I say, well, who's that? And then I would go and research for myself and say, I want to check that out. And I'm like, wow, a whole different genre of music I can appreciate that isn't readily available. I think our children are underexposed to jazz music.
That's right.
I really do, and I think we have to address that. That's a part of culture. Jazz culture is a part of black culture, is a part of Latino culture. It's a part of culture, and we have to, you know, expose our children to that.
And what intrigues me about you and these albums that you put out, with the album Dash, you had kind of stepped out of your comfort zone.
Yes.
To not only evolve as an artist, but to tackle something new.
Yes.
And then when I even read into the actual message behind the Dash, I found it very interesting.
Right.
So talk to us about what it took for you to get out of your comfort zone as an artist to create this album and the message behind the title.
Well, I always wanted to produce an album like The Dash, which is funk, but I didn't have the courage. But knowing that I was having a daughter on the way, I found that I started writing based on seeing my wife pregnant and appreciating the pregnancy. Sometimes she felt as if, oh, I'm too big. You know, the self-esteem issue with her body changing. And so I started to write about those issues and write about being more responsible, knowing that I'm responsible for another human being.
Right.
And so that's why, you know, The Dash is about, you know, you're born and you transition. But what matters is the dash in between, what you do in between. That's where your legacy is. And so I wanted to write about that. I was thinking about legacy. What will my legacy be, and what can I hand to my daughter? You know, she's going to have to inherit this legacy, and a credible legacy that she could say, I'm proud to have a father who stood up in the face of opposition. I had someone who was courageous and who was a warrior for our people. And so that's where the courage of the Dash came, strictly from, you know, watching my wife and my daughter being born.
And speaking on legacy, and your daughter's not the only child that's been impacted by what it is that you do as an educator and activist.
Yes.
You started your own nonprofit organization, and you started pouring your love and passion for hip hop and the culture with these children here in Delaware. Talk to us about your nonprofit organization. How did you birth that, and why? Well,
the nonprofit organization, the nonprofit organization is Culture Restoration Project, and one of the programs, which is the most sought after, is Beyond Those Bars, and we use hip hop as a way to educate them. So we teach them literacy, confidence, communication, character development. They create their own song lyrics that are based on social issues. So we force them to look at social issues, and they pick their own topics. We bring a mobile recording studio in, and they're learning aspects of that. They shoot a music video, and they actually perform. So they're getting a lot of skills. People think they're just in there just writing rhymes or whatever, but when you listen to any of the music they produce, these are social issues. They're talking about violence, they're talking about poverty, they're talking about these things, and it's beautiful to have an impact on the next generation, because that's ultimately that's what we have to do. We have to prepare the next generation to carry the baton. All this work is in vain if we don't pass it on and someone picks up the baton and moves it forward.
And in working with these young youth, the younger generation, what are some of the topics that you've been hearing repetitively, the voice that they're using that they want to talk about?
Of course, violence. Violence is a serious issue that we have to address. And what we do recognize is that I believe the individuals that are committing the majority of the violence, over 80% of those individuals, don't have adequate education.
Okay.
So education is extremely important. We have to give them the education. And so violence is something that continues to come up in poverty, because most of them live in impoverished conditions.
Okay.
And so we take a look at poverty in terms of generational poverty and inequalities and laws that have been passed that have caused this situation. And so we're trying to, get them to be aware, to understand that vote locally. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Be aware of what's going on in your neighborhood and how these policies and laws impact you. So we're trying to start them out at a young age. So when they're 18 and 19 and when they finally get an opportunity to vote, they're aware, because they've had a history of individuals that cared enough to give them that education.
And what are some of the benefits that you've seen? We all know, or those who've experienced music, any type of genre, it could have some type of therapeutic effect on them.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the benefits you found with these kids, even with yourself, that you've been able to express on paper?
I mean, it's beautiful. I'll tell you one of the things, there are children that have been in our program and they wouldn't talk to therapists. They're not willing to. And I've seen this, I've seen this on the street corner. I see brothers who, or sisters who would just, their lyrics, their song lyrics, she was like, that's painful. Wow, you really went through that? These are things they wouldn't normally share in other settings. They feel comfortable in hip hop. And so, just being able to attach them to therapists and whatnot and work with the therapists to give them the type of therapy so they can open up.
Okay.
And then we can start the healing process. But sometimes they're just, the culture, they say that person doesn't understand my struggle. They haven't been where I've been.
Right.
I grew up in the inner city, so they feel comfortable with us. And so they're willing to open up, and then we're willing to give them the support systems that they need.
And we do have some music videos of yours. Talk to us in regards to the process of producing it and actually having the whole thing come together. What is like the thing that best interests you? I'm
a creator. I'm a visual creator.
I see.
This right here is Black Lives Matter with the children of Christina Cultural Arts Center. And as you can see, they're just amazing. And these themes, they're talking about, they all picked an individual that was murdered, and one picked Malcolm, one picked Martin, and they actually researched their life. They had to research, what did Malcolm do? Why was he so impactful? Why was Malcolm X beloved? And they had to research, take that research and then put that into song form.
Okay.
So it's educate. They're doing something they love, because they're like, I get a chance to record, I get a chance to shoot a music video, I get a chance to be on YouTube.
Right.
But now you know what Martin stood for. That's intimately, right? You know about his life. You know why he's important to us. So these are the kinds of educational things that we're trying to give them. Normally, a lot of them would not seek out these individuals to research into their life.
And that's what I like about you as the artist and the educator. You're uplifting. Your music is so uplifting. You're not talking about drugs. You're not talking about money. You're not talking about women and most of the music that are nowadays being produced.
Yeah.
You're really educating on them, on the history of who they are, the culture.
Absolutely.
And also pushing them to learn more about their history. I think that's amazing.
Well, it's a challenge being the type of artist I am. It comes with its challenges. I mean, a lot of people, I'm not interested in being signed to a label, because a lot of these themes that I talk about would be disallowed. So I'm comfortable in being who I am and where I am, because for me it's about imparting that knowledge and watching that generation grow.
And it's just wonderful to see the kids in their element. It
Yes.
truly is. And they've been also recognized on other news networks and
Absolutely.
other newspapers as well.
Yes.
I think it's just an amazing process for them as well to see that, you work on something, you keep working on it, and then you see the end result.
Yes, and it's impactful to the community. The community has been very supportive of their efforts, and that's beautiful, because that's the piece that we need. They are inspiring. I mean, if you think some of our children have uncles and fathers and that are committing some of these heinous acts. So to hear this young generation to come home with this music and say, listen to this, it's life-changing.
Right.
To say, wow, look at you, you're talking about stopping the violence, and you're talking about you don't like the violent things that are going on. So it's generational and it's communal.
And that's something about you. You're not afraid to use your voice to talk about the issues that some might find very, don't speak about that, or very intimidating. But you go ahead, and I don't want to say you like push the button, but you go ahead and you use your voice in that manner. But you've mentioned some civil rights leaders that you had these kids look up on for their music. And with anyone who wants to push change comes with a lot of triumph, but also a lot of obstacles.
Yeah.
And for you, I remember the time when it was published in our local news journal that your house had caught on fire, and it wasn't something that happened from within the house. It was something that was actually intentional.
Yeah.
So with all the change that you're trying to make in our community and with our children, there's a lot of people who support you, but then there's people out here who don't want to see that or don't want to see you elevate.
Absolutely.
And especially for the cause that you speak on. So talk to us about that moment in your life, because it affected not only you, it affected your wife, your family,
Yes.
All the possessions that you had in the house, but you didn't let that deteriorate you. So talk to us about that moment in your life, not only as an artist trying to produce albums, but also as a father and a husband.
I mean, that was a point where I said, I had to question whether this was worth it, because essentially you don't realize until that moment that you're putting your life on the line for what you truly believe in. And there was a point where I said, I don't know if I want to continue to do this, because I'm putting other people in harm's way. My wife is, I want to protect her. That's what, as men, we have a responsibility to protect and make sure that they're okay. But she assured me, that continue to do what you do. The great Robert Nesta Marley, I mean, there was an assassination attempt on his life. The great Dr. King, I mean, he was great. He brought people together. He was about peace. They murdered him. So this comes along with the territory. So, I tell people, don't romanticize the struggle, because it has its great, everybody's like, you're doing a good job, but then there's individuals, who we were once told you're banned from doing anything in the downtown district by certain individuals. So, I mean, it just comes along with the territory, and I just think we're created for this. I think our ancestors prepared us for this day and gave us enough courage so that we can continue on the fight.
And are you ever scared or frightened when you're out there performing that something might happen? And if you're not, talk to us about how you do not walk in fear. I'm
a very spiritual man, so, I'm always in communication with our ancestors and always in communication with, our deities. And so they've assured me that you'll be protected, even if physically I'm taken away. The message lives on. And so, we operate, we don't operate in the spirit of fear, because if I operated in the spirit of fear, I wouldn't do it. I'm accessible to my community.
Right.
And so, it's just one of those things that comes along with the territory. We have to be strong. We have to be out there. Malcolm didn't hide. Martin didn't hide. They continued to work. And those kinds of things inspire me to say, continue to do what you do and know that you're going to face adversity. All of the greats faced adversity. And not to say that, I'm a part of that, the greats, but I feel like I'm in the spirit of the Bob Marleys. And I feel like that spirit has been imparted on me. And so I don't, I'm not fearful. I mean, there's times where, of course, as a human being, the human condition causes us to be fearful at times. But as a whole, I'm out there doing the work.
You are. Like after the house fire, instead of like staying home or at someone's relative's house and like crying about it, you really like were thinking outside the box.
It up.
You did. You came up with the Richard Rawl Week, where you've partnered with other businesses here in Wilmington, Delaware. You had a series. Well, I'll let you tell us the story, like how you were able to come from that and birth the Richard Rawl Week. And what is that?
It was very difficult. That was a challenge because we had no possessions. You know, the house took almost everything. I mean, we didn't even have clothes that we had access to. So, and to still do Richard Rawl Week and still have those community partners, because then you think the community partners may feel this brother's not safe. Somebody is really trying to attack him. Now, we don't feel safe working with him. So I'm just thankful. We call this Garvey City. And I'm thankful for all the constituents in Garvey City who supported us, because without that support, we couldn't operate. It was the community that came together and raised funds for us.
They did, I saw.
They raised a lot
over 10,000,
of money.
yeah.
I mean, it's just amazing. And so, you know, my community, I feel like they embrace and love me. You know, when local artists talk about, it's hard here, and you do the work, and you're going to reap what you sow.
You do.
And we put a lot. So, I mean, we were able to do Richard Rawl Week, which was amazing because we gave a platform to so many artists, and that's what we wanted to do. Of course, we couldn't return Richard Rawl Week because our work is, you know, it's so numerous right now. We're doing so much, and so we hope to have the continuation of Richard Rawl Week in 2020.
That's amazing.
And to do a week-long event where there'll be education, there'll be culture, there'll be political education. You know, all of these things are what we want to do and base it around music. You know, I would love for our young artists, especially some of our artists in the community, and I've been having this conversation, I would love for you to go to the city council meeting and voice your frustrations in the form of a rap.
Oh, that would
go
be nice.
there because, you know, and
that actually puts a spin on things, because not only are you adding the musical entity of it, you're actually adding that voice and that layer of the hard issues you want to talk about and express.
Absolutely. Well, we have to get them to the table, and sometimes it's a challenge because they feel like no one wants to hear our voice. But you know, we have to continue to speak. We have to speak truth to power. I'm all about speaking truth to power, you know, and I'm all anti-establishment because I feel like the establishment has let us down, and so we have a responsibility.
We do, and something resonated with me there. There was once a person who told me this quote about, if you're not at the table, you're often the meal. So it's very important that you make your way there.
We have to be everywhere.
That's right. And so talk to us about, as a young man coming from Wilmington, you had the opportunity to perform at BET Jams. Talk to us about this experience, and how did you land that opportunity?
Well, you know, just connections in the industry, and somebody said, your voice is powerful, you need to go on there. And I thought, because when I went on there, I talked about Monsanto, you know, and now we can see the case is out there that Monsanto is a product that causes cancer. It's a cancer-causing agent. So I went on, this was a few years ago, and I talked about Monsanto, I talked about racism, and I was like, are they going to edit me out? So I was very cautious about that because of the type of art that I create. So, but they didn't, they embraced it. And I was like, wow. So that was an amazing experience. And for me, that was more or less for Garvey City. That was for them, you know, saying that, look, we're here. This is great. This is aspirational. That's what I did it for. Not less myself. You know, I'm really not into, oh, you know, you went on BET, that's amazing. And I'm like, yeah, I did that to encourage the next generation, that's all.
Okay, and before we leave, talk to us about the future of Richard Rawl. I know you have an album that just dropped in May of this year. You've been touring the country, you've been getting that music out of there. I think you've actually closed the Queen one time in the past.
Yes.
So you're like the local Jay-Z, right? Closing down the Queen. But talk to us about the future of Richard Rawl. Where are you going? I know you're touring this year, but talk to us.
Yeah, I mean, we're headed out on tour very soon. Houston, California, Florida. So, you know, we continue to promote this album, which is called The Proletariat, and that is really an ode to our people, our constituents. And so I guess the future for Richard Rawl is, you know, doing more programmatic things. We wish to have Beyond Those Bars as a program in as many schools as possible. We feel like this is great for our schools, and that's what we want. We want to be in as many schools as possible and expanding the program. Now we're getting calls from across the country, and now people are asking, can you come and bring this program to our location. And so that's going to be the future.
And lastly, what words of encouragement would you leave with the youth that might be watching, or even the adults that are watching you, that would wish that they had the strength that you have in regards to using their voice to make change in our community and to also educate others?
Speak out, throw paint on the wall. That's the one thing that I say. And sometimes you may be absolutely wrong, but in that wrong, it's a lesson.
That's right.
So I say speak out, and you may not have the facts, but somebody may come and give you the facts, and then you can transform your voice and kind of direct your voice into a way where it's productive.
Well, thank you so much, Richard, for your time.
Absolutely.
I know there's so much more we can talk about.
Yeah, we can go on and on.
Definitely, and hopefully we'll have you back on in the future.
Thank you.
And congratulations on all the things you've been doing in our community.
Thank you.
Thank you. And on behalf of all of us here at Channel 22 WITN, we would like to take this opportunity to say thank you for watching this episode of In Focus. I've been your host, Yesenia Taveras.